I'm Rebecca Mostyn, Director of Research at the Australia Council, and I'm joined by Lena Stein, Research Associate and the main author of this report.
Hello.
Before we dive into the tourism research, just a little bit about the research function of the Australia Council. The Australia Council has a legislative mandate to conduct and commission research about the arts. It's written into the Australia Council Act. The purpose of our research is to build knowledge and evidence about Australian arts activity and the environment in which the arts are created, distributed and experienced. Research is an essential part of how the Australia Council informs policy advice, decision-making, strategic planning and, importantly, advocacy. And it provides evidence that forms the basis of the Council's targeted submissions to government inquiries and reviews. Our research work also supports the sector with information on arts practice, on audiences and markets, and it helps to leverage opportunities for new investment. The Council uses a range of research approaches, including both qualitative and quantitative methods. We undertake primary research as well as new analysis of existing data, and this new tourism report is an example of new analysis of existing data, which Lena will explain further shortly. We conduct analysis in-house. Again, the tourism report is an example of this. And we also commission research and we work in partnership with the arts sector and with universities. And on the screen here, we have a selection of our research work from the last 5 years or so, including our 2 flagship reports, the National Arts Participation Survey, which we run every 3 years, and the Economic Study of Professional Artists, which Professor David Throsby and his colleagues at Macquarie University carry out for the Australia Council. That piece of work has been tracking trends in the lives and working conditions of Australian artists over the last 30 years and identifying challenges and opportunities for artists' careers into the future. Hot off the press is our latest research report, Domestic Arts Tourism Connecting the Country. We undertook this research in order to look at trends and draw out insights about how Australians connect with the arts as they travel around the country. So it helps to build the picture of Australians' willingness to travel for the arts, and also the value of the arts in helping us to understand the place we're in, as well as the capacity of the arts to support local economies through tourism. So I'll hand over to Lena now, who will take you through some of the key findings in the report. We will be answering questions at the end, so please feel free to start sending them through. The way to register your questions is just to click on the Q&A button and type in your question. So over to you now, Lena.
Thanks, Rebecca. So this new research report on domestic tourism in Australia is a companion piece to our international arts tourism research, and together they highlight the value of arts and culture to Australia's tourism strategies and the importance of a vibrant creative landscape for tourism and the broader visitor economy. And in the midst of the recovery from the recent bushfires, these tourism messages are especially important. The data sourced for both of these reports is from Tourism Research Australia's National Visitor Survey. Tourism Research Australia sits within Austrade, and they survey both domestic and international travellers, both inbound and outbound, and the data collected about their trips is available for us to use and analyse. Within the data available, of the activities that travellers attend or engage with on a domestic trip, we created a net or a grouping of all of the arts activity categories to look at engagement with the arts as a whole and also the arts activity categories separately. Acknowledging that the arts activity categories listed here are quite broad and blurry and not being able to drill down into the data further, we've also included short case studies to sit alongside the data to draw a broader picture of arts engagement in the different regions of the country that we've profiled in the report. For example, the northwest region of Tasmania is a strong area for arts tourism, as our data found. 10% of total day trips to northwest Tasmania included an arts activity, higher than the national average of 6%. And we found that the most popular arts day trip activity in Tasmania in 2018 was attending festivals, fairs and cultural events. So given what the data was saying about northwest Tasmania, we profiled the Unconformity Festival in Queenstown to explore how festivals could be drawing domestic arts tourists to the region, and additional research found that Queenstown's population of 1,800 triples to around 4,000 during the festival. We also did analysis on both day trips and overnight trips. In the database, day trip visitors are defined as Australian residents who travelled at least 50 kilometres away from their home on a round trip and are away from home for at least 4 hours, but don't spend a night away. Australians travelling on day trips are likely to go to destinations closer to their home, given the limited time that day trips afford. Whereas overnight trips are taken by Australians wanting to stay longer at their destination or who may be visiting a destination that is further away from their home. These trips are defined as a trip where Australian residents stayed 1 or more nights at least 40 kilometres from home while travelling within Australia. So that's the brief background of the research. Now a couple of the key findings. Domestic arts tourism is growing. In addition to population growth and overall growth in domestic tourism, the numbers of Australians engaging with the arts domestically are also increasing. Over the past decade, arts engagement on day trips grew 60% and arts engagement on overnight trips grew just over 70%, both overtaking the growth in total day trips and total overnight trips. So while we're seeing this growth overall, there are still differences in trends across different activities and different locations around Australia. While major cities account for the largest volume of arts tourism, in part driven by the performing arts with access to many large venues in cities, the destinations where tourists are especially likely to engage with the arts are in regional Australia. In the Lassiter region, which makes up the southwest Northern Territory and is also home to Uluru, 37% of visitors who stopped overnight there engaged with the arts, compared to just 13% for Australia overall. So along with the strong trends in regional Australia, First Nations arts tourism is also strong and growing. As we know from our last National Arts Participation Survey, Australians' interest in First Nations arts is growing, which is also reflected in the data here. What's interesting is that the regions where tourists are most likely to engage with the arts are in regional areas of the Northern Territory, where the arts engagement is driven by First Nations arts. Coming back to Lassiter as an example, more than a quarter of all visitors to the region attended or engaged with First Nations arts. And it reinforces the particular strength and value of First Nations arts to regional and remote communities, their economies, and to tourism in Australia overall. And finally, similar to the international arts tourism findings, domestic arts tourism tends to align with travelling further, staying longer, and spending more than the average tourist. We found that Australians are more likely to engage with the arts when they travel further away from home, including those who take overnight trips rather than day trips, and those who travel outside their home state. So I'll pass you back to Rebecca now.
Great, thank you, Lena, for taking us through those results. Now I can see we've got some questions coming through. Please keep them coming. We'll get to them in just a moment. A reminder that you need to click on the Q&A button to register your questions. Before we get to questions though, I just wanted to mention some of the ways that we hope to see this research being used. Firstly, it equips artists and arts organisations with information about the behaviours and interests of tourists in a wide range of locations and destinations throughout Australia. And the full report, if you've seen it, is over 80 pages. So there's quite a lot of specific detail, including summaries for each state and territory. So we hope it will be useful for both arts organisations and the tourism sector to help with planning activities and for identifying opportunities. The research also shines a light on the value and importance of the arts, and that's a big part of our role here at the Australia Council and the research function that we have. It's about being able to analyse and report on the contribution and the impact of the arts to the country. So that includes social and cultural value, as well as the ways in which the arts help to sustain and grow economies, and the increasing importance of creative skills to a range of industries, which, you know, this piece of research kind of ticks a lot of those boxes. And we really hope that the information made available through this research and the strong messages that are coming out of it that Lena has just talked you through will provide the sector with really useful evidence to be able to advocate for the value and the importance of the arts. You can head to the link on the screen for the full report, as well as a range of advocacy tools and key messages that are all available from that page. And now I think we will start addressing some of your questions. So the first one's coming from Diego. Does tourist just mean people on holiday, Lena?
So no, tourists, domestic tourists within the data available are asked about their main reason for trip, and categories included holiday, visiting friends and relatives, and business. So they can be travelling for a range of reasons.
Okay. And is arts tourism different to cultural tourism?
Yeah, so cultural tourism tends to be slightly broader in scope and includes heritage activities such as visiting history or heritage buildings, sites or monuments, or visiting Aboriginal sites or communities. So it's a bit broader in scope than just the arts activity categories that we've looked at.
Great. And then one from Katie, can we access data at an LGA level? No, Katie, this data isn't available at the LGA level. The data comes from Tourism Research Australia, and they define their own tourism regions. So there are how many regions?
So there's 77 tourism regions that are defined by Tourism Research Australia. And that's sort of just within their own database. The data is available at a more granular level. However, you'd have to define those yourself, or get in touch with Tourism Research Australia, and they might be able to let you know some more information about that.
Yeah. So there's obviously lots of different ways to kind of break up the country geographically, and yeah, the tourism regions is the one that's predominantly used for the tourism sector.
Yeah, Tourism Australia uses these regions, and as well as the state and territory tourism bodies.
Great. Another question from Katie. Thank you, Katie. What sources are you drawing data from, and how can we contribute to these if we are running arts events and programs in our region? Well, obviously the data is coming from Tourism Research Australia, and it does have some limitations, which Lena's sort of talked about that a bit. And because of that, we really wanted to make sure that we kind of fleshed it out with some case studies and some examples and other sources of information that are out there that we reference throughout the report. So we're very interested in hearing about case studies that we could, potentially keep adding. So I guess the best thing is just to drop us a line at if you go to the Australia Council website, just use the kind of general email or get in touch with one of us.
In the research team.
In the research team, yeah. Okay, thank you. Another one from Diego. Can we expect more tourism reports? We are hoping you will have hopefully seen our international arts tourism report that we did about 12 months ago, which looked at the similar trends among international tourists to Australia. Again, the data comes from Tourism Research Australia. It's compiled on a different basis though. So these are kind of companion reports. What we are hoping to do is to be able to update the data for both of those on an annual basis. So if you kind of keep your eye on our website, we probably around this time next year, we will be able to update the data as we go. And any new insights that become available, we'll kind of value add to that as well. Okay, so a question from Anya. Did the data produce insight about percentage of trips where arts and culture were the reason for travel? I suppose the TRA data, it looks at activities that people undertake. It doesn't necessarily ask them their motivations for.
Yeah, that's one of the limitations of the data. Activities we aren't able to look at activities as a reason for trip. Only the categories I mentioned earlier, such as holiday, business, or visiting friends or relatives. And that's part of the reason why we've tried to include case studies for particular regions and activities where we're seeing increases or high proportions, just to add a bit more context to the data. Yeah. So I suppose as a whole, both the Tourism Research Australia data and the extra case studies will produce those insights.
Great, thank you. And a question from Kristen. What do we know about the demographics of arts tourists? Are they a particular type, from particular places and backgrounds, or a relatively diverse group?
What we noticed in the data is that arts tourists are quite similar to the profile of domestic tourists overall, which is great news because it shows that arts tourists are all of us. They are however slightly more likely to be female and in an older age category, but quite similar overall in profile to tourists overall.
Great, thanks, Lena. And a question from Lucy. Our visitation is high in day trippers. Are there any example of arts experiences which are more attractive to these audiences? Well, if you have a look at the full report, we do have separate sections on day trips and overnight trips, and so you can kind of drill into what's happening amongst day trips.
Yes, so we've split out day trips into metropolitan and regional areas, so you can see which arts activities are most popular in those regions in terms of proportion and volume. It depends where you might be located, but there's lots of insight and detail in the report on different regions and
the states and territory breakdowns as well. Okay, we've got an anonymous question. Do these findings mean there will be more investment in the arts as part of bushfire/economic recovery? Well, you probably will be aware of the government's Bushfire Recovery Fund that was announced a little while ago to attract domestic and international visitors back to those bushfire affected areas. And they did sort of specifically talk about new attractions, including concerts and festivals and art installations, etc. So there is that activity. And I think, as mentioned, we do think this is having this data available on the value of the arts to tourism around the country, and in particular in regional areas at this time, does help with making the case for the value of funding for that kind of activity. So who knows what's ahead. Okay, a question from Di. Are there particular art forms that are growing in popularity relative to others, such as performing arts?
Yeah, so we do have data for that question in the report. We've looked at 2 time periods over the last decade from 2009 and also the last 5 years from 2014. And we've included increases over both of those time periods. For day trips, over the last decade, the activity which has seen the largest increase has been festivals, fairs and cultural events. That's grown 80% since 2009 for day trips. And for overnight trips, First Nations arts, craft and cultural displays has grown 107% from 2009. So that's for overnight trips. So there are differences in different activities across the country, but bearing in mind that the figures I've just said are for the whole country, so Australia overall, and there will be differences in different regions. So
yeah, and the report does a lot of digging into examples of where there are particular trends in particular parts of the country. So but it's pretty strong growth. Really.
Yeah, overall 60% for day trips for all arts activities and 71% for overnight trips. So, and that's averaged across all of the arts activities. So really, really strong overall.
Thanks, Lena. Okay, a clarification question. Did you say there were 77 regions? How do we know which region we are in from Dawn?
So Tourism Research Australia has region maps on their website, and there's not the geographical boundaries are defined by the ABS, and there's more information on Tourism Research Australia's website too. The regions, the names of the regions are defined at the back of the report, but I would say if you were wanting to know the specific region you're in, the maps on Tourism Research Australia's website will help you define.
And we do list them in the report. So Dawn's follow-up question was, she's assuming Tasmania has north, east and south.
Yes, so in Tasmania there's Hobart and the south, the east coast, Launceston and the northwest and the west coast. So there's 5 regions in Tasmania.
Yeah, so it does get relatively granular, which, you know, obviously is really useful to the tourism sector to have those distinctions. Okay, another question from Diego. Thank you, Diego. What is the most popular arts destination in Australia? Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. If we look, there's two ways for looking at it, the total numbers or the proportion of tourists to that place who engage with the arts.
Yeah, so on the whole, in terms of volume, capital cities and East Coast cities are drawing the largest numbers of arts tourists, just because they are quite a large hub and just draw a lot of tourists in general. However, if we're looking at the proportion of tourists who are engaging with the arts, even if a region or a location or a state has a smaller overall number of tourists visiting, if we're looking at proportions, that kind of speaks to their likelihood to engage with the arts. Yeah, and so we can look at how strong those regions are. But in terms of volume overall, it would be capital city regions.
Thanks, Lena. Okay, another one from Anya. Were there any interesting correlations between activities undertaken by tourists in a trip? Okay, so Anya, I'm guessing you mean tourists doing sort of multiple activities, whether, you know, if the ones who are attending performing arts might also be doing another arts activity or another type of activity. That's something that we haven't.
That's a limitation in the data. So while we can look at, for example, a group of tourists who have definitely visited a museum or an art gallery, they might have also done a number of other activities during their trip. So we kind of can't really split those out and say people have only attended a museum or a festival. They can have attended a museum or a festival. So that's one of the limitations of the data.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, Dawn just wanted to clarify those regions in Tasmania.
Yes, so, sorry, I probably went a bit fast there. So we've got Hobart and the south, the east coast, Launceston and the northwest, and the west coast of Tasmania.
Okay, and Dawn, yeah, please feel free to have a look at the report as well, because I think we've got some pretty nice examples for Tasmania throughout the report as well. And another question from Katie. So there has been talk about links between arts and tourism for years. What role is the Australia Council playing in it and advocating at a national or state level for tourism departments and programs to provide funding to arts? And will new funding be made available to support arts tourism within Australia Council programs? So Katie, yes, we sort of touched on this a little bit earlier. So the research plays a big role in this advocacy work. Just having this research and having it available and having it kind of producing a set of findings and messages that are usable by the arts sector to speak to the tourism sector. And also we strongly feel that this is a useful piece of work for the tourism sector directly. That has quite a bit of value in itself, I think, to be able to have these discussions. The Australia Council does have relationships with the tourism sector through this kind of work, so we are having discussions with them. In terms of funding, we kind of haven't got there at this stage. You'd be aware that a lot of our funding operates from a kind of an arm's length peer process. So it's really up to the peers which projects kind of get funded. And there's certainly, a lot of projects that do get funded around regional Australia. So yeah, maybe watch this space and hopefully we'll see a lot more discussion about that intersection between arts and tourism and the economic value of the arts to tourism activity. Okay, we've got a nice quote from Katie as well. Domestic tourists are more likely to attend the arts than sports events and amusement parks or wineries.
Yes, that is an excellent data point and speaks to what Rebecca has been saying about the value of the arts and the advocacy messages that this research can play, and sort of speaking to the importance of arts and culture to tourism. So thank you.
Yeah, and a nice comment from Anya too. Thank you. Sorry about my coughing. Okay, I think we might leave the questions there. Yes, feel free to shoot questions through to us.
If any more come up over
the
the course of the day, we're here to answer them.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
Just before we go, we thought it's a good opportunity to give you a bit of a heads up on some of our upcoming research work. So if you're in Sydney this Thursday, the 27th of February, come along to a session that we're co-hosting with the Australian Film, Television and Radio School and Screen Australia about blockchain and the creative industries. As we all know, technology is increasingly being used to receive and pay for creative content, as well as to follow artists' works and express preferences. So technology companies and platforms have become really quite powerful players in our sector. Blockchain technology, very briefly, is new infrastructure that's predicted to shake up how everybody does business by decentralising control. And there have already been some experiments with blockchains for royalty payments for music and screen works, for example, as well as for proving authenticity of visual art and fashion, and for avoiding ticket scalping. And that's just, among other models that are being experimented with. So it should be a really interesting discussion. We've got a range of people working with blockchain technology who will be explaining what it is and how it works and stepping through their business models. And we'll have a discussion with people from across the screen and art sectors, and that's people with different points of view about blockchain, about what the technology might mean for how we do business in the future. You can head to the link on the screen again to find details for that session, and also to read an introductory report prepared by RMIT on blockchain and the creative industries. And we'll just leave you with a couple of highlights of research that will be coming out over the next few months. Keep your eye out for an upcoming report on arts and creativity in education. That's a partnership that we're doing with the Sydney Opera House, looking at their schools program, and it's got some really strong and interesting results. So that'll be coming out in the next few months. And our next National Arts Participation Survey will also be published mid-year. This will have the latest data on how Australians aged 15 years and over are engaging with the arts. That's whether they're attending, creating themselves, engaging online, and also their attitudes to the arts. So yeah, just a couple of things to keep your eye out for. And yeah, thank you again for joining us to talk about Australia Council research. And you'll find all of the things that we've discussed today at the link on your screen. So goodbye for now.
Thank you.